Welcome back to Marcelian Online, and if you can keep a secret, I have something to tell you. You've been lied about stats and gear in general. No, really, the current items that you loot season by season and even every new expansion that is being released are kind of a lie and really don't exist in an abstract way. Let me tell you what I mean. The video is made possible thanks to the support of our Patreons. You guys help keep our ideas and videos going and the channel growing as well. On behalf of the Marcelian Online team, thank you. The stats and items are a lie. There are so many ways we can talk about that, but the biggest takeaway is that they don't actually exist, and by the end of the video I might actually ruin the concept of gearing in WoW for you. If you take two items of the same type, let's say two leather boots, and give them the same item level, both of them would end up with the same amount of armor, stamina, and main stat, while the secondary stats can be added up and will result in more or less the same amount on both pieces. No matter what you do, what dungeon you run, raid you clear, delve you loot, if the item has the same item level as any other item of the same type, their stats are exactly the same. This means that when you choose an item, you never choose an item because of the amount of armor it gives, or the amount of stamina you receive, or even the main stat it provides. You choose an item because of its item level, since all stats scale with item level to decimals, sometimes rounded up or down. Just think about it. When was the last time you looked at the amount of stamina an item gave you and decided to wear it because of what you saw? Have you ever looked at the amount of armor a shield gives and got to the conclusion that the item is too weak for your tank? Nope. It was all item level in the end. Secondary stats scale with item level as well, but there are 4 secondary stats and your item can only have 2 of them at a time. So really you are looking at 6 total pairs of boots: Haste Mastery, Haste Crit, Haste Verse, Crit Mastery, and Mastery Verse. And if we want to be generous, we can admit that one of those stats will be the primary, aka the one you have more of, and if you flip the amount, you have 12 total boots. And that's being extra charitable towards the loot table. That's it. Those are all the boots you have, and maybe if you are lucky, you get them to roll a tertiary stat that will amount to absolutely fuck all, since you cannot reliably farm that tertiary stat to ever get a relevant amount of leech or avoidance that will make a difference that you can actually feel in the game. And let me double down on it. These 12 pairs of boots are the same boots you have been looting every patch and every expansion. There is no membranous slippers, there is just the Crit Mastery boots. Every patch has a a Crit Mastery pair of boots. Every expansion has one also. What changes is whether you want Crit Mastery or another thing. You don't actually want boots, you want Crit Mastery, since all boots inherently come with armor, stamina, and main stat, which are equal to all other boots of the same item level. Blizzard could actually replace main stat, stamina, armor, and item level and call it something like item power. You collect this item power into what would now be your total character item level and scale your stamina and main stat with it, and you would have the exact same amount of health points, armor, and strength, or whatever. I'm not sure what your stance on this is, but to me, in an RPG where I am supposed to find epic pieces of loot, this is incredibly underwhelming and disappointing. This is not new, by the way. This is the system we have been having for a lot of expansions. This is what you get when gear is homogenized. You get a base template on top of which you add a minuscule amount of player decision, which in our case revolves around the secondary stat pair your character ideally wants. This would have been a boring gearing system back in 2004 when the game launched, which is why back then we had a gearing system a few dozen times more complex than what we have now. Not every item had a main stat on it, and there were epic items with no stats on them at all, but a powerful effect or just a big fat raw DPS if it was a weapon. There was no item level, there were just individual items with individual power. It would be a bit hard to judge the value hierarchy of items if they don't have a common denominator factor, but at the same time, that's what would make gear interesting. I can go over the fact that epic items don't exist anymore either. If you have a rare chest piece of a certain item level and a coincidental epic chest piece of the same item level, they would both have the same amount of armor, provided both are leathers or plates or etc. The same amount of stamina also, main stat, and the sum of the secondary stats would also be the same. The colors on items are pointless since, once again, they don't change the value of an item, only item level does. So as with stats, we could just as well get rid of purples and blues and greens and just have items with item level on them, and the end result will be the same damn thing. The main problem with this style of items is that it's close to impossible to make them interesting, let alone epic. Because item level is the only real value an item has, it is the only real variable that the devs can influence to create strong and hopefully desirable items. As such, the problem that is created because of it is the item level inflation. This emerges in a few ways in the game. First of all, in between each season we have massive item level jumps where next season's LFR content will reward you with the equivalent of this season's mythic rewards. If you don't believe me, you can go right now in the game, open up your dungeon journal and look at the raid rewards in Dragonflight. When you scale them by difficulty, you can see the item levels and how they change from one season to another. The reason this happens mainly is because we need players to have a big power to chase in the new gear system. Outside of cool procs from trinkets and occasionally weapons, which I will get to in a bit, there is nothing else to chase except a bigger item level. And for the power to be felt between seasons but also visually on the tooltip of the item, the difference in numbers has to be high, where now we are doing millions of damage per second. This happened, I believe, twice before in the past, after which all of the numbers have been squished. Something you will experience going into midnight, as the devs already confirmed. Because numbers go high, then get squished, then go high again, squished again, it creates a disconnect between the player and the perception of power that your character has. It has no power, really, in the grand scheme of things. The only power it has is relative to the content you do. If you go back to your 15-year-old self and tell him you are doing 1 million DPS in 2024, he will lose his mind over how dope and strong you are. But if you wait one more year and tell him that in 2026 or whenever Midnight launches, you'll be doing 5k DPS, he'll be perplexed as shit and not understand it anymore. So really, can you say you are attached to how strong your character is if the number that's coming out of your fireball goes up and down every few years? The second problem this creates is that they cannot make main stat items anymore. Because there is a standard for what an item is, the power scaled in its item level, the devs have to balance the content based on the relative power players have with their equipped item level that assumes a certain amount of armor, stamina and main stat people will have. Meaning that they cannot create a trinket with just armor since inherently it will most likely be useless. The tank that has to beat the raid or dungeon needs a certain amount of armor to not die to melee attacks. Armor that is provided by its regular gear. If the armor is not enough, the tank dies. The devs have to nerf the content, which means that looking for a trinket with armor is going to be pointless if not all tanks will see it as mandatory, making it not an actual choice. If the armor is too high, the trinket with armor is again pointless, which is the case that we've been having for the last couple of expansions. This applies to stamina as well. There is a reason we haven't had stamina flasks in a while, or why, throughout history, nobody really recommended stamina flasks. This is also to address the new ring that came out in 1107, which has a gem that gives you that stamina. Stamina and armor are dead stats that just have to exist no matter what for people to survive the content, and whenever they are there by default, they might as well just be baseline. This is similar to talents. Whenever you always pick the same talent no matter what, because it's either too strong or the spec just doesn't work without it, there is no choice there, so it eventually becomes baseline. Same with stamina and armor on items. Can you explain to me what the fuck does 21,159 stamina on my helmet means? If I upgraded my two-handed axe, I gain 85 strength, 749 stamina, 18 haste and 10 versatility. Do any of these numbers mean anything? Or is it just the more the better? Whenever systems like these exist, it turns us into sheep that chase the herd to the next big number that comes out. That's not always bad, but when it's all the time, it just gets boring. The existence of item level is making it easier for people to figure out if something is an upgrade or not, since 99% of the time, higher item level means it is better. But that also means that nobody will look at the other stats save for the secondary pair combo. The solution is simple, but probably difficult to implement, and the solution is in our trinkets, which are the only ones that don't follow the dumb item level rule. That is because they have interesting, often conditional effects that actually warrant a choice from the player on whether or not they are good for their character, and even more importantly, whether or not they can be played. And I am looking at you, Transmitter. This is why trinkets are the most sought after pieces of gear. This is why people can call out their names and say, I want a Spy Master or a Sack Brood. Quick, can you tell me the name of your belt right now? You know, the one you are wearing? Or better yet, can you tell me the name of the best belt in the game for you that you are chasing? Because I can. The best belt for you is a 639 item level belt. Ka-ching! The trinket effects are usually called cantrips in the RPG community, which is a Dungeons & Dragons term, not sure if it is where it originated. And we had cantrip weapons in the past. Occasionally raids have these, and whether the effects of those weapons make you want to pull your hairs out or not, you cannot argue that you at least remember them. You remember the Jarun Spear from Rashok, or Nimue Staff from Amirdrasil. Now those can be called epic items, while the rest might as well be color-coded blue. And we don't have to have all the items be cantrips, that would be a bit ridiculous. But if we have stat sticks, then by God, how about we make them good stat sticks? If you're going to make an epic shield for tanks, how about make it have either a ridiculous amount of stamina, and I mean a stupid amount like 200,000, or give it more block chance, armor, or an effect to give you damage reduction proc when you get hit and only 20,000 stamina instead. The problem with any of these changes is that it upsets the balance of the formula that the WoW team has for the game design, a formula that is easy to keep up with when each patch you just need another set of 6 boots and not have to think creatively too hard about making them memorable. The problem with any of these systems is that they are painfully obvious and boring to the point that more and more players are of the mindset of, man, but I just do the same thing this patch as last expansion. It's all just the same. Maybe the solutions I propose are bad and unrealistic. Fine. But please make items that I can remember, because I have yet to see someone be excited or make a YouTube video of a particular modern retail axe of a specific name that everyone knows what the topic of the discussion is. I don't want to go back to Classic, but I want to stop losing to Classic when it comes to basic RPG core pillars, man. It's been 20 years. Surely you can get 10 nerds around the table, put a pot of coffee there and give them 8 hours to think of the coolest items any warrior, druid, mage and so on can use and be excited about and chase in the new patch yet to be released. WoW has changed a lot, and the War Within is a great expansion and would be one of the best if the core pillars can be addressed and fixed before we bleed out too many players. One of which is Mythic Plus, which has received very good changes. But can it be saved? Click here and find out.